Hey there folks, welcome to the channel. I'm glad you can make it because in today's episode, we're going to be doing things a little out of order. Here recently I got wind of a product that claims you could dry cure meat, things like prosciutto, culatello, salami, coppa, all those beautiful dry cured charcuterie projects. Well, this device claims you could do it all in your home ice chest. Not only does it claim you could do it in your ice chest, but it also claims that you could turn your ice chest into a hot box, a warming tray, a refrigerator, a freezer. It's pretty extraordinary, the claims that it made. So I'm in the process of doing a review for that unit. It's called the Cellar 12, and if you want to do your own research, I'll put a link to it in the description box below. Now, you know, before I put a review video out, we're going to have to run this thing through the ringer. And so right now we're testing out Cellar 12's ability to dry cure meat. We have several projects in there ranging from easy to more difficult. And what I wanted my first project to be was something that didn't take a long time, 4 weeks max, but was a little on the challenging side. And that brings us to our Italian-inspired pork tenderloin. When you have cuts like the pork tenderloin that have zero fat, basically everything is exposed to the elements. Your temperature, your humidity, and your airflow play critical factors into whether or not you have success or failure. How did it turn out? You'll find out at the end of this video. Let's dry cure some meat. Here's the pork tenderloin we're going to be using, and notice right here at the end it tapers down, and the same thing goes for the other side. And if we choose to do nothing, which is totally fine, what will happen when we go to dry it is those two end pieces will dry faster than the center, which technically isn't a problem, but in this particular case I want everything to dry evenly, so we're going to trim those two pieces off, leaving us with a center cut that is exactly the same size end to end. Generally, I'll take these trim pieces and then just make sausage out of it. So here we go. This is what we're going to be working with. Now, at this point, if you want to clean it up, you certainly can. I want this to have zero fat on it, so we're going to remove all the fat, and the silver skin bit right here, we're going to remove that, and we're going to be left with a piece of pork tenderloin that is 100% clean, and this looks great. Our next step is to weigh it. Now, you could follow this technique and even this recipe with literally any cut you want. If you want to use venison, if you want to use beef, it doesn't really matter. When we weigh it, our total is 285 grams, and I'm going to jot that down. That's going to be our base number for determining how much of our spices we need to add. We're going to write this recipe on camera right now. We're going to start with salt and cure number one. Cure number one, because this project isn't going to take longer than a month. I want this to be on the savory side, so white pepper, fennel pollen, a little flavor enhancer, garlic, and onion. There we go. When it comes to figuring out how much of each one to put, salt and cure is generally going to be the same. 2.5% salt, 0.25% cure number one. As far as the rest of the ingredients, I need to determine whether I want them to be prominent or accent. So white pepper, onion powder, garlic powder are going to accent. The fennel pollen, it's going to come in a little bit heavier. We want that to be a little more pronounced. And then I've got a flavor enhancer that we're going to add called Savor Ye. And that's going to really boost the savory quality, the umami quality, and help draw on the natural, sweetness and flavors of our tenderloin. I feel like I'm pretty happy with this. It looks like we have a pretty decent balance, and now we just have to go ahead and convert everything into actual grams. Now, if you go to my website and you click on the link and you want to make this recipe, all you have to do is enter the weight of your meat, and it doesn't matter what cut you're using. In our case, it was 285 grams, but if yours is 1,000 grams or 2,000 grams, let's say you want to use this recipe and make a coppa, just enter the weight, and then all of the ingredients are going to auto-populate to let you know exactly how much to add. I do recommend doing it in grams. It's more precise. And here we go. This is what everything looks like. There's our cure number one. Very small amounts of everything. We've got our fennel pollen, incredible ingredient. We've got this from Craft Butcher's Pantry. I put a link in the description box. Cool thing about this ingredient is that you don't need to use a lot, and it really impacts the flavor in just a tremendous way. A little onion powder, garlic powder, and then, of course, our Savor Ye, which is a flavor enhancer. Beautiful ingredient. We'll talk a little bit more about it towards the end of this video. All I'm going to do is combine all the ingredients. Now, we could have done that to begin with, but I just wanted to show each one of them as we were making them. And then once you have everything combined, you're going to spread that onto your whole muscle. This is what they call an equilibrium cure, which means that 100% of that spice mix is going to be mixed and incorporated with that meat. And let me know in the comment section below, what's your experience with dry curing meats? Are you just getting started? Are you an expert? What are your concerns? Let me know in the comment section below. We'll talk about it. All right, once you've got the seasoning onto the meat, we now need to figure out how long this needs to hang out in our fridge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the thickest part, and in our case, they're both roughly about the same. And using my thumb, which is approximately 1.25 inches, we're going to measure the diameter of our cut. And so that's the number we're going to use to calculate how long this needs to hang out and brine in our refrigerator. This is a salt brine curing calculator from the website Genuine Ideas. I'll put a link in the description. And we are on the tab that says brining time. So right here, we're going to enter in the thickness, 1.25. And we want to make sure that inches is checked. And the shape of this is tubular, like a cone. Now, when we hit enter, it'll tell us 1 day is all we need. But right there, there's a little note that says we should add 20% just to make sure that it's fully cured. Well, 20% of 1 day is only like 5 hours. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bump that up to 2 days. And that brings me to the next point. If you happen to over-cure this, it's not that big a deal. So if you forget about it and a week goes by, it's totally fine. Now, I've got the tenderloin in a vacuum bag. We're going to get 100% of that spice mix into that bag. Now, you don't need a vacuum bag. If you want to use a Ziploc bag, you could totally do that. Just try to get as much air out of it as possible. And right here, we wrote all of the pertinent information down. So we've got our fennel tenderloin, 1¼ inch thick, 2 days brine time. It's going in on the 16th of February and coming out on the 18th of February. A quick vacuum seal, and now we are ready to go. This is ready to go into the refrigerator. One thing I do like to do, and I believe that it helps the curing and the flavor, is to massage the meat while it's in the bag during the curing time. So during the time that this is in the fridge, I'll massage the meat, work those spices into the meat. This is going to help the salt penetrate. It's going to help those flavors really get embedded into the meat, and then I'll put it back in the fridge. And I'll normally do this, 3 or 4 times, depending on how long it cures. In this case, it's a very short cure time. So into the fridge it goes, and it's now 48 hours later. We need to prepare a mold culture. One thing you need to know about dry curing meats is that mold will grow on your meat unless you do something to stop it. The mold culture that we're going to be using today, let's see what we have on hand. Mold 800, there we go. I give it a shake, make sure it's nice and loose. And notice the best use by date. It's November 2022. The company that produces this would tell you to toss it out the window. I'm telling you not to. It will stay good for years and years and years after that best use by date. Just store it, preferably in a vacuum bag in the coldest part of your freezer. So we're going to add roughly about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon to 1 cup of water. And this is going to be our mold solution. Now, one of the issues that I hear a lot of you guys tell me is that, what do I do with this mold solution? I'm always throwing it away. It's very expensive. Well, I'm going to show you how to fix that here in a second. But before we do that, I want to get my molds and my cultures back in the freezer. And if you recognize this bag, it's because we have literally been using the exact same bag for about 3 years. And I just pop it back in the freezer. Keeps everything nice and fresh. To our mold solution, guess what? We're going to add some dextrose. That's also about a teaspoon. And then I'm going to add roughly 1/4 teaspoon of some kosher salt. And there we go. So what I just did was create a mold solution that can be stored in the refrigerator. I was originally going to put it in this container here, but right at the last second I changed my mind and I went with something plastic. I don't want, the aluminum or whatever that's made out of to affect the mold. So we're going to put it in this plastic bottle. And at this point, this can be stored in the refrigerator for up to 60 days. The dextrose is food for the culture. The salt keeps bad things from growing. And whenever you need it, just pull it out, let it hang on your counter for about an hour, spray your meat, and then place it back in your refrigerator. All right, hopefully that helps somebody. This is our meat. It just came out of the fridge 48 hours later. Looks absolutely beautiful. What we need to do now is put this into a casing. And another question we get quite a bit is, do we need to rinse that off before you put it into a casing? And I would say no, keep those spices on there. That's going to bring a whole lot of flavor. I mean, if it's overly wet, you can give it a very gentle blot, but you don't want the meat to be bone dry when you get it into that casing because you want that casing to adhere to the meat. I'm going to be using dry curing wraps from the sausage maker. Now, this is a kit. You don't need the kit. I believe they sell just the wraps alone. And they are hands down some of the most versatile casings you could use in this craft. Trust me when I tell you. All I did was cut a piece off of a bigger sheet, and we're going to go ahead and fold it up. When it comes to wrapping this casing around your meat, the thickest you want it to be is 2 wraps. You don't want to overwrap this by wrapping it, 3 or 4 times. You could do 1 wrap, that's totally fine. But when you start to overwrap, and like I said, 3 or 4 times, then you start to negatively affect the way that it dries. It takes too long, and then you'll end up with a spoiled product. So that bottom flap is folded over. We'll do that top flap here in a second, and I am going to put a bit of netting on there. And for those of you that always ask, what size netting is it? This is the number 8 size. So that's one of the smaller sizes that's meant for tenderloin or small diameter salami. And once we get that on there, I'm going to now wrap the top part down so that the netting will basically secure it, and we are good to go. This tenderloin's not very heavy, so I'm not entirely concerned that it's going to slip out of that netting, so we're just going to do some very simple knots on the top and the bottom. And when we do that, you want to twist the tenderloin while holding the netting so that the netting will tighten up, ensuring that cylindrical shape. And just in case you're new to dry curing meats, the process that I'm showing you for this particular project can be applied to literally any whole muscle cut. When you start getting into salami, that's slightly different, but when you're dealing with whole muscles, the process is exactly the same, which makes whole muscle dry curing a great place to start. Let's weigh the cut, and it looks like we are at 297 grams, and I've written that on a tag. The actual weight, 297, we're targeting a 35% weight loss, which means when we get to 193 grams, then this will be ready to eat. If you like it very soft, you can target a 30% weight loss. If you like it on the drier and more firm side, you can target a 40% weight loss. Give it a nice prick to make sure that there's no air pockets. And once we're done with that, we can stick this into our dry curing chamber, which in this case is our ice chest. I'm going to spray the meat down with some of the mold solution that we prepared a little while ago. And I love this method of applying mold solution because it really conserves your mold. You don't need a lot. You just give it a nice little spritz and you are good to go. Now, if you want to inoculate your ice chest, just spray the entire thing down, which I think is a good idea. You can always come back and clean it later if you need to take it on a picnic or whatnot. But now we're done. That unit in there, that's the Cellar 12 that's blowing cool air into the ice chest. And let's take a peek at the base of it. So there's two components to the Cellar 12. All of the hoses are coming in through the drain of the ice chest. And it looks like my temperature right now, which you can adjust, is at 54 Fahrenheit. And it looks like the humidity is, where is it at? There we go, 89%. 89% humidity, which is a little on the high end, but granted, we did spray a lot of water in there. So we're going to watch this carefully over the next several weeks, and I'm going to continue to add projects as this dries, so we're going to have a bunch of things in there by the time it's all over with. 21 days have passed, and this is what our pork tenderloin now looks like. I have added several more projects to the ice chest because I want to see how the Cellar 12 operates, you know, with bigger size cuts and fattier cuts and things like that. And one thing I did do was I did mount that Cellar 12 to the side of the ice chest. You can affix it with some double-sided sticky tape, but because of that high humidity, that sticky tape doesn't tend to stick so good. And so I did mount it on the side, which I didn't find to be a problem. All right, this is our tenderloin covered in mold. It smells incredible. And at 35%, I got to tell you, this feels really good. I mean, it's got a very nice, even squish, so to speak, all the way throughout. There isn't one section that feels more firm than the other. Close down the ice chest, and let's go weigh this piece of meat just to make sure that it's finished. So we were targeting 193 grams. That's a 35% weight loss. And if we're fairly close to that, I think we should go ahead and pull it. It looks like we are at 194. Okay, so there we go. This is going to be quite soft and tender. So if you prefer something a little more firm, I would definitely let it go a little bit longer, maybe target 38 or even 40%. So all we got to do now is remove the netting and remove the casing. And if the collagen sheet is really stuck to the meat and you find it hard to remove, just dip it in water for a couple of minutes, let that casing rehydrate a little bit, and it'll come off very, very easy. But in our case, it's peeling off with no problem. Absolutely beautiful. Loving the aromas coming from this project. The mold is really coming through quite a bit, as well as the fennel pollen. Smells incredible. Wow. Okay. Very nice. Very pleased with the way this turned out. All right, let's just give it a little slice. This is really where it's all at. What does the inside look like? It feels nice and soft. Oh, wow. That's incredible. Woo. Look at that. Perfectly dried from edge to center. Let's get this on a slicer and see how it tastes. Very happy with the way this turned out. Pieces look great. They look beautifully dried, nice and tender. Oh, that's going to be good. All right, let's give it a taste. All right, guys, our pork tenderloin is ready. Check that out. This actually dried incredibly quick. Now, we did dry ours to 35%, which I tend to do when it comes to whole muscles, your copa, your prosciutto, your bresaola, your, tenderloin, whatever, because I like the softer chew, I like the texture. But if you let it go to 40%, which is going to be a little bit drier, a little more firm, then you may end up at that 28 to 30 day mark after you're done dry curing. One more peek on the finished product. If I had to comment as to how it looks, I would say this dried perfectly. Like I said earlier, this is a very challenging cut. I mean, there is literally no fat whatsoever. And so all sides are exposed, which means the conditions inside your drying chamber are critical. Check that out. Beautiful looking slice there. I'm kind of impressed. That's awesome looking. Now, 35% is going to be super tender, and I may lose you guys here because of how soft this is, but if you enjoy that softer, more tender bite, you got to make sure you slice it paper thin. If you slice it too thick, then it tends to be a little gummy, almost like a meat gummy bear. But if you slice it very thinly, it just almost melts in your mouth. It's just such a great experience. Speaking of which, let's go in for a bite. Wow. That is so good. I was not expecting that. I got to be honest. I don't know what I was expecting. We kind of wrote this recipe on the fly. I knew the notes that I wanted. I wanted fennel, onion. I wanted, a nice, beautiful, savory umami element coming from it. Wow, this has far surpassed my expectations. I'm going to put a recipe link in the description box below. So if you want to make this at home, you can find the recipe in the bottom. The complexity of flavor coming from this, for it being such a short cure time, is absolutely astounding. Typically, you get flavors like this when you dry things like your copa, your lonzino, things that are a little bit bigger. They take maybe 2+ months to make. 3 weeks? This is unbelievable. I'm loving the mold. We use mold 800 in this recipe. And I was on the fence about mold 800 in the beginning. Unlike mold 600, which only has one strain of mold, Penicillium nalgiavense, mold 800 has 2 strains of mold, Penicillium nalgiavense and Penicillium candidum. And if you're familiar with both of those strains, you know that they each bring their own flavor and aroma profile. Well, in this project, the Penicillium candidum is throwing down. I mean, I am definitely picking up a sweeter, more floral, cheesy quality rather than what mold 600 normally brings, which is a funky, almost earthy quality. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind funky and earthy, but I do like the change of pace, especially with something like a pork tenderloin, because it does pull out that sweetness. Another ingredient that is very interesting in here that tends to draw on the sweetness of the meat is the fennel pollen. Very different than the fennel seed or the fennel powder. The fennel pollen also has that floral element. It also tends to bring out the sweetness of the meat. If you don't currently use fennel pollen in your charcuterie, I'll put a link to where I got mine. It's a brilliant ingredient. I know it can be a little costly, but honestly, you don't use a lot in your projects, and it makes a huge difference. The other ingredient that we added, which has made a huge impact on flavor, and truthfully, this is the first time I've added it to a charcuterie project, and I absolutely love it. It is this ingredient here. Savory is a yeast extract. That's it. There's nothing else in it. It's a 1 ingredient product, and it is an incredible flavor enhancer. I'll put a link in the description box below if you want to check out some info on Savory. And what it's done is added this insane umami, meaty quality to our pork tenderloin. Absolutely amazing. So you're definitely going to see that in more of our recipes, no doubt about it. Overall, super thrilled about how this turned out. Matter of fact, I got to go in for one more bite before we talk about the Cellar 12 preliminarily. So here we go. That's ridiculous. It just blooms on the tongue as the flavors just continue to evolve. And seasoned, absolutely spot on. I love the savory quality of this charcuterie. It's a break from the typical spicy stuff that we make. And so this is an absolute must. Recipe in the description box below, and feel free to have fun with the recipe. A lot of cool directions you can go with this. Use this as a starting platform. All right, let's talk about the Cellar 12 and how it relates to this tenderloin. Now remember, this is not a review video. I'm just giving you my thoughts regarding that unit and today's project. A review video will be on the horizon. At the end of the day, regardless of what I think about the Cellar 12, the proof is in the pudding. This is what it produced, at least for this project. And if you're not currently subscribed, you may want to hit that subscribe button, because as the next projects come out, you'll be able to see how it performed with slightly more difficult, slightly easier projects so that you could gauge for yourself. I set the temperature of the Cellar 12 to a 55 degree Fahrenheit or 13 Celsius, and it maintained an average of about 53.9 to 54.2. I was happy with that. The thing that did concern me in the beginning was the humidity. There's not a really good way to control humidity, and I was only making preliminary, observations. The humidity averaged relatively high, at least for me. Now, that could be because I live in a very humid environment. I don't know if you can tell I'm sweating right now. Or it could be the fact that the unit produces quite a bit of humidity. The average humidity for me was somewhere around 89%. And it kind of hovered around 89%. Every once in a while, it would drop down to like 84, 85. Every once in a while, it would get up to 95, 96. And I thought that that was going to be a problem, because under normal circumstances, when you have a really elevated humidity, your meat doesn't tend to dry on time. It tends to take a long time. The other issue is mold. When your humidity is super high, you can certainly bring in or grow mold really quick. That was not a problem here. And after looking at the unit, what I deduced was that there is a constant state of airflow that's coming from the Cellar 12. And because the space that we are drying the meat in isn't enormous, I was using a fairly small, I want to say 42 or 45 quart ice chest, that airflow is blowing in that area constantly. And so normally too much airflow would be problematic, too much humidity would be problematic, but in this case, they worked perfectly together. That airflow allowed this to dry faster than normal, while that increased humidity kept it from getting dry ring. That's all I'm saying. I don't know. You be the judge. Let me know in the comment section below. What do you think about this? What do you think about the concept of being able to dry cure meat in your ice chest? We are just getting started. Like I said, we've got several more projects. One is almost about to be done. We have a Copa, we have a Lonzino, also a beautiful pancetta, and I want you guys to check out those results and let me know what you think. As far as this goes, 100% success. Honestly, I'm blown away. I was not expecting the unit to produce charcuterie like this. I mean, this is professional quality charcuterie. I mean, and it tastes absolutely amazing. So there you go. That's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks a lot for joining me. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions about this recipe, about the Cellar 12, or if you want more information on that particular unit, like I said, I'll have a link in the description box below. I did contact Marshall, who is the developer, the creator of the Cellar 12, and I asked if we could get a discount code for our audience. So if you decide to pull the trigger on one of these units, be sure to use the discount code so that you can save a couple bucks on your purchase. All right, guys, thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.